Hello and welcome to the Slate Political Gabfest. July 31st, 2025, the Gaza is Starving edition. I'm David Plotz of CityCast. I'm out of my usual haunts. I'm in Salt Lake City on business. Hello, Salt Lake City. Also out of her usual haunts, Emily Bazelon, who's somewhere away from her home because she's got beautiful wood that is not her usual beautiful wood behind her. Hello, Emily.
Hello, hello. I am in the state of Maine and so glad to be here. And hi, John.
Hi.
John Dickerson in his usual haunt. It's haunted. He is haunted. CBS Evening News. Hello, John, from New York City.
Hello, David. Hello, Emily. You guys are super refreshing this morning. I'm going to try and take some, solace, or I need a boost, and you guys are just the ones to give it to me.
Well, we've got such cheery topics.
Yeah.
This week on the Gabfest, why is Gaza starving? What is Israel trying to accomplish there? And why is the world not working harder to stop it? Then Brown and Columbia have now capitulated to Trump's hold-up campaign of higher education. Will Harvard capitulate? Should it capitulate? What does this portend? Then Emile Beauvais, Trump hatchet man, was confirmed to a federal appeals court despite a lot of whistleblower evidence of alarming unjudicial behavior. Is Trump's campaign to bring the judiciary to heel working? Plus, we'll have cocktail chatter. Decisions made in Washington can affect your portfolio every day. But what policy changes should investors be watching? Washington Wise is an original podcast from Charles Schwab that unpacks the stories making news in Washington right now and how they may affect your finances and portfolio. Listen at schwab.com/WashingtonWise.
Choosing a bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drink that's all flavor and just 100 calories? Easy. Choosing between creamy vanilla, double chocolate, and sea salt caramel flavors? A little harder. Try the delicious new Starbucks Frappuccino light drinks. Look for them wherever you buy groceries. Start with Starbucks coffee.
The situation in Gaza is an international catastrophe. It's a human tragedy on a massive scale. Most of the population of Gaza has been displaced. Most of Gaza itself, the physical infrastructure of Gaza, has been destroyed by the Israeli army. They're closing in on about 100,000 dead in Gaza, including about 20,000 children. One child an hour has died in Gaza since this war began 600 plus days ago. And in it, much of the country is starving. The entire health and education systems have been destroyed, and only minimal aid is allowed to reach the enclave because the Israeli government and the Israeli army have blocked it, have decided that it should not go. So, Emily, I don't know where to start with this. I mean, there's international outrage about this. I mean, who cannot look at these pictures and be heartbroken at the suffering of people who are innocent? And yet it continues. Why does it continue? Why has Israel so far been resistant to actually take steps that would relieve the suffering?
Yeah, I mean, I also feel just totally desperate and despairing about this situation, which is unconscionable to have children dying of starvation and hunger-related causes and so many people being killed trying to get aid. I mean, I think the sort of larger strategic problem is that Hamas and Netanyahu's right-wing government are kind of weirdly aligned in some ways. Neither of them wants the war to end because Netanyahu is using it to keep his coalition together and stay in power while he's under indictment. And Hamas doesn't want to be routed from Gaza and give up its leadership and give up the hostages it's holding, which are, the Israeli rationale for continuing to wage war. I mean, it just seems increasingly clear that neither side has any kind of real strategy here. And it's just continuing of the absolutely horrible status quo for their own self-interested reasons. And that they're both really bad players in terms of the welfare of, all these people who are being affected. And then, I mean, there's this separate issue of the actual delivery of the aid. You know, Israel has claimed forever that Hamas has been stealing aid that comes in. And so it's necessary to keep restraints on the aid in order to avoid like Hamas taking it all and feeding their own soldiers instead of the people for whom it's intended. The Israeli military cast some doubt on that whole set of claims this week. And also this alternative aid delivery system that Israel set up with some partnership with people in the United States is just failing. I mean, if people are getting mowed down when they're trying to get aid in this, there are only 4 sites in the country, I think, that have been delivering it, although I think that's eased up a little bit, then obviously the way you're doing this is not working.
And the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation that you were referring to, not only were there people were getting killed and making the calculation that the risk of getting killed was worth it because the starvation was so bad. It wasn't just that people were getting shot trying to get sacks of flour, but that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was very bad at distributing food and that it followed none of the practices that actually get food to people. And that what happens when you get to starvation level is, as Margaret Brennan was explaining to me, is the food that you're delivering is no longer the kind of food that starving babies need because they've gone so far into malnutrition. And
Emily, I mean, you are absolutely right to point out that both of these are bad actors, and Hamas has behaved abominably through this, and this is a war that began because of a Hamas atrocity, and the way Hamas fights is unjust and imposes huge risks on civilian populations. That said, at the moment, the suffering that happens in Gaza can be eased by the Israelis. They choose not to ease it. They could take steps, and they choose not to. So it is, to me, the kind of complicity for the starvation. Hamas, of course, deserves blame, but it is the Israeli government that allows it to continue day after day. And to me, like one of the things that, and I don't know where I started reading this, but I think that it was such a good point, is that there are 2 things to me that are kind of unconscionable about what is going on. One is that the fighting of the war was not unjust or immoral or unconscionable. Like it was I'm not saying it was necessarily the way for Israel to defeat an enemy that had attacked its territory and attacked civilians, but it was, wars can be fought justly. The problem is a war that's fought without an end in mind, without an end intended, without a strategy to win it. And that to me is immoral, number one. And number two, it is immoral to destroy all people's means of living, to destroy people's means of housing them. You've destroyed shelter, you've destroyed education, you've destroyed healthcare, and you've destroyed the delivery of food. Those are basically the 4 fundamental things that people, and water, I suppose, which is another whole issue, the 5 fundamental things that people need to survive. And Israel has just destroyed the capacity of Gaza to provide that without having a way forward. And that's just like, it's terrible and sad and immoral. And the number of people suffering because of it is a stain on humanity.
When I interviewed former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert about this, somebody in the audience stood up and said, but what Hamas did on the 7th of October was evil, and that this is all a part of that campaign. And Olmert's point was, this was just in the wake of Israel's successful attacks against Iran. And Olmert was like, Israel can take care of Iran in a couple of days. And the number of people left in Hamas who are an actual threat to Israel now is so small that this is massively out of whack with the danger posed by Hamas today. So to allow these things, so his point was basically disproportionality detached from the 7th of October, which he supported the response in that, and in fact was quite praiseworthy of Netanyahu, who he dislikes intensely, about Iran. But the point was that, like, it's long past the 7th of October, and also with the Israeli posture in Lebanon, where basically the IDF has positions inside Lebanon, can confront Hezbollah when it needs to, but it hasn't done in Lebanon what it is doing in Gaza. But the argument goes it easily could without having to do the attacking and the starving.
Emily, it is a weird day when you find yourself agreeing with Marjorie Taylor Greene, by the way. Did you guys, her statement about this, I thought was so completely right. Like,
yeah,
no?
Honestly, go ahead.
She said, this October 7th was a horror and it was wrong. And what is happening now? I mean, she just basically said what is happening now is an act of monumental cruelty and causing excessive suffering. I mean, she just said the obvious thing. And it was Marjorie Taylor Greene, which was just, wow. Look, none of us is in Israel. Emily, you and I both have ties to Israel. But do you feel that for Israelis, the suffering of the Gazans, is it invisible? Is it discounted because it's being exaggerated? Is it being blamed on Hamas? Why is it that you think that Israelis can look on this and say, well, this seems necessary?
I would just interject, Emily, before your expertise rolls in. Deborah Powder reported for us this week that there was actually a shift, that what was starting to happen at these protests is that people were arriving with the pictures of starving Gazans, and that it's breaking through in the media in a way that it hadn't before. So that she reported an actual shift in public opinion on this.
Yeah, I was going to start by saying I think the protests showing pictures of Gazan children, that is a shift. You're right, John. And there are Israeli academics and human rights organizations that are denouncing Israel in increasingly strong terms and even using the word genocide, which is this accusation which Israel completely rejects. But, when you think of a definition of genocide that is more about trying to drive out a people and take away all the vital ingredients of what humans need to live, like you were saying, David, then you can understand why this accusation is kind of taking root in a different way than it did, I think, last year or right after October 7th, when I think it seemed premature. And you have scholars of the Holocaust like Omer Bartov at Brown who are saying, like, I didn't think this was a genocide, but now I do. And here is why. And I think some of that is breaking through to Israelis. I also think it is true that for a lot of Israelis, they blame Hamas instead of their own government for this huge amount of suffering. But I also, this Israeli government is talking about driving people out of Gaza, and that adds to the fuel of the genocide accusations. It also is completely delusional. There are 1.5 million people in the Gaza Strip. There are 7 million Palestinians in, Israel and the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And that fact on both sides, that there are 7 million people on both sides, seems to get kind of lost to the extremists because they are imagining a world in which they're the only people there. And that's just not possible. And that's what is just so, at the heart of this tragedy. And it's the fact that it keeps going and going, and that we are having such a long time of this still unnamed war, and that there's no end in sight for imagining a better future. And yet that fundamental reality remains: 7 million people of both sorts here on this land.
Speaking of things that are lost, to the extent that any position is fixable beyond the length of time it says to take it, the president of the United States position is still that all Gazans should be removed to turn it into, I don't know how you would describe it, but a resort area. Yes. And I mean, then the two-state solution is no longer U.S. policy. And there was a weird little hiccup in that position when Keir Starmer said that he would recognize a Palestinian state by September if Israel didn't improve the situation, which both was related to the starvation and the bombing of Gaza. And Trump didn't seem to mind. In fact, he said that's fine. Now, as of Thursday, Trump has said that the Canadians who are considering also doing that he'd have a hard time finalizing the trade deal with the United States if they went ahead and kept doing that. So in terms of, to the extent that Trump's view of those pictures of starving children in Gaza did put pressure on Netanyahu to open up, to have, humanitarian corridors and a pause, to the extent that that President Trump influences Netanyahu, we've seen him kind of on various sides of things this week with respect to this symbolic act of declaring a Palestinian state.
I want to make 2 points about this. One is I think it is almost certainly the case that there will be significant action to relieve the immediate starvation in Gaza. I suspect like the level of rancor and rhetoric in the world and the effect the protests are having even within Israel are going to cause that to be changed, and that Gazans will be fed at a minimal level. However, just to circle back to the point earlier, this Israeli government and this Israeli public is not going to allow the steps that could ever lead to something like a Palestinian state or even a tolerable life for Palestinians. Schools, freedom of movement, higher education, property rights, freedom from settler violence and settler expansion. Like those are things that are not on the agenda for Israel right now. And so I just, as you say, Emily, like whatever relief comes for the children and starving people of Gaza is a temporary relief that will do nothing to address the fact that there is no long-term strategic plan for what is going to happen in Gaza or the West Bank, except a kind of full separation and of people living living immiserated while their neighbors are wealthy. That's the first point. Second point I want to make is, are you guys, either of you, surprised there hasn't been like a serious concerted effort by the world? I feel like had the British government and the French government and the Saudi government each of them loaded up a naval ship with food and just said, we're bringing this to Gaza, and just like that would have Israel's not going to like stop a British naval ship that is bringing relief supplies. It might not be an effective way to bring relief supplies into Gaza. I don't even know, but just there's been a lot of like of hand wringing, but no action from a world that could very easily just dare the Israelis to try to stop this kind of relief. And there hasn't been an effort to relieve, which I thought was weird.
Well, there have been...
Only by activists.
Yeah. Well, not by the countries you named, but I mean, Jordan is trying to drop food. The problem, of course, with dropping food into Gaza is A, it can hit people and kill them. B, some of it lands in the ocean. And we had images this week on the broadcast of people rowing out to get soggy bags of flour. I mean, it's just incredibly inefficient. And one plane is basically the equivalent of one truck. And depending on whose estimates you see, it requires like 600 to 900 trucks a day to start making a dent in this long-term problem. So planes aren't going to do it. But which is not exactly your point, David. I'm just mentioning adjacent facts. I play that out, though. So presumably the Brits, so they launch a plane and say, we're going to land where?
No, they bring a ship.
Okay.
They bring a ship.
But where's it going to dock?
Well,
like who's going to... no, I guess I'm just saying...
I don't think I think the logistics are bad. I just think it would it would just force it would just tell the Israelis, like, the world is not going to sit by. Right now, the world sits by and it's like, tut, you shouldn't do that. But there's been like an effort to sort of say, we're going to try to do this. We're going to try to bring things in. And Israel, don't you dare stop us.
I did find unsatisfying the work I was doing this week, trying to find out the practical impact of declaring a Palestinian state. I mean, other than just incredibly symbolic. I think more than 120 countries have already done it. So for Canada, Great Britain, and France to do it, I kept looking for like the payoffs and I think this supports your point, David, which is that's all that's being done. That's not going to do much.
This episode of the Gabfest is sponsored by Quince. Maybe you're not big on trends, but you're big on clothes that feel good and last. You should check out Quince. Their lightweight layers and high quality staples will become an everyday essential for you. They are for me. I'm sitting here in a hotel room. I have business meetings today. And I had business meetings, and I was like, what am I going to wear to look sharp, but casual, but sharp, but casual, but sharp? And I'm wearing this black Quince shirt, short sleeve, button-down shirt that is so comfortable. It's so cool. I'm in a hot place, so it's very cooling. And I looked in my suitcase, and basically everything I brought to wear for this several days of meetings is Quince. It's great. It's super high quality. It's super comfortable. They have all the things that you want to wear over and over again, like crisp cotton shirts and comfortable lightweight pants. I'm wearing comfortable lightweight pants. So stick to the staples that last with elevated essentials from Quince. Go to quince.com/gabfest for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/Gabfest to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/Gabfest.
Juguemos a Adivina el precio de Burlington. El regreso escolar significa volver a ahorrar. Traemos jeans para tus niños desde, un momento, solo $11.99. Burlington pasa el examen. ¿Y qué tal las mochilas con personajes? Las tenemos desde $12.99. Burlington lo ha vuelto a hacer. ¿Y los tenis para niños? Marcas de primera y a la última moda desde $11.99. ¡Ya puedes ahorrar! Burlington, marcas, rebajas, ¡wow! Los estilos y selección varían por tienda.
This episode of the Gabfest is sponsored by SelectQuote. It seems every day there's something new to worry about. Well, there's a lot that's out of our control. There's one thing you can control: your family's financial future with life insurance through SelectQuote. SelectQuote has been one of America's leading insurance brokers for more than 2 million families since 1985. And their licensed insurance agents can work to tailor a life insurance policy for your individual needs in as little as 15 minutes. They work with carriers that can get you same-day coverage with no medical exam required. It's important to protect your family and your health, and life insurance can provide that peace of mind. Head to selectquote.com, and a licensed insurance agent will call quickly with the right policy for your life and your budget. SelectQuote. They shop, you save. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/Gabfest. Go to selectquote.com/Gabfest today to get started. That's selectquote.com/Gabfest. The Ivy League is coming to heel for the Trump administration. Columbia has negotiated a settlement with the administration. It will pay $221 million to settle claims. Emily will get into the details roughly that it allowed anti-Semitism to flourish, to settle some civil rights claims about anti-Semitism. It will submit to a monitor who will look at its admissions policies, and it will aggressively continue its efforts to deter anti-Semitism and quash student protests that are perceived as anti-Semitic. And in return, it will get back $400 million in federal funding it lost, and it will presumably diminish the risk of losing a lot more. Brown has made a similar settlement on much smaller financial terms. There was less action around it, just $50 million. A huge, clear victory for the Trump administration in its campaign against universities, although not at all clearly the wrong decisions for Columbia and Brown to make. Harvard now faces the same dismal options. And the signs are that Harvard, after really standing up to Trump and doing a lot of legal fighting, is preparing to settle probably for more money than Columbia paid. So, Emily, you have been following this a lot. Why did Columbia settle, first of all?
Well, I mean, I think you have to recognize the tremendous power of the federal government, which really does pose an existential crisis to these universities. Like, yes, these are institutions with huge endowments, but when you're talking about taking hundreds of millions of dollars of federal funds away, in Harvard's case, billions of dollars, and that could go into the future, you're really imagining a world in which these are not research institutions anymore. And the kind of 70-year compact in which the universities have been so much an engine for scientific and medical progress in the world is going to be broken. And that just fundamentally changes the universities. And the government has withdrawn these funds, whether that's legal or not. And I think it is pretty much illegal. But from the point of view of the schools, the amount of time it takes to unwind all that or challenge it through litigation is like a considerable cost. Also, there's the power to investigate that the government has, right? So, I mean, Harvard, yes, stood up to the Trump administration, has sued in federal court, and has also been at the receiving end of a number of investigations, losing potentially access to student visas for international students. A judge had to block that. There also are threats to its tax-exempt status. There was a big fraud investigation from the SEC. Just this ongoing set of guns that the Trump administration can train on any one institution. So in a lot of ways, these settlements are necessary for the schools. The question to me that I think matters a whole lot is what the terms are that they've agreed to. And there's some interesting contrasts between the Columbia and the Brown agreements. So Columbia agreed to an independent monitor who is going to have access to all of its data about admissions and hiring, with these kind of foreboding warnings about any kind of diversity awareness on the school's part that, depending on how you read this, like go beyond the Supreme Court rulings barring affirmative action and addressing racial preferences in hiring in the last couple of years. And one of the clauses also gives access to the United States, meaning the Trump administration, to the admissions data and to anything that's, quote, related to the settlement. And that just seems like, from the school's point of view, a really potentially onerous intrusion into their affairs. And you can imagine how this is going to play out, that if you're trying to admit students of color or make a hire, that suddenly you're going to have to imagine ahead of time that you're going to be subject to all this extra scrutiny and you're going to have to justify it at every turn. And maybe you'll do it anyway, but maybe you won't. The chilling effect of that seems substantial to me. And in the Brown agreement, there is no independent monitor. And the paragraph about admissions, this strict reading or maybe extra reading of anti-affirmative action law is still in there. But the fact that there isn't a monitor, arguably could put Brown in a better position going forward. And then there's also the question of where this money is going to. I mean, the Columbia $221 million is going to the federal treasury, and Brown is investing $50 million, I think, over 10 years in workforce development in Rhode Island, which seems like a good thing for Brown to do, actually.
Why are you shaking your head and laughing at that? Because it's going to somebody's cousin Vinny or something?
Well, no, it just seems like such a... this is not the most important thing, but while we're here, it just seems like somebody at Brown did something smart in the sense. Now, obviously, Harvard's a bigger target, but as Emily just said, that's not a bad thing, workforce development in Providence. And so whoever worked that out with an administration that is on the hunt for punishing Ivy Leagues to get away with that lesser punishment, is obviously was skilled in managing the Trump team. So that's why I was shaking my head.
I mean, but I guess now I'm going to seem like some kind of weird Harvard or Columbia patriot. I mean, Columbia is the New York university. It's a university that has a long historic relationship with Trump and was also visible in those protests in a way that there was stuff that went on in Brown, but not nearly as visibly at Brown. And so Columbia is a much bigger target than Brown was. And it was a much bigger deal for them to scalp Columbia. And it's an even bigger deal to scalp Harvard because Harvard is the biggest name in higher education.
Right. They may just be in different negotiating positions for those very reasons, David. I have to go back, though, to the basic question of legality here of what the Trump administration has been doing, right? There have been no findings of actual anti-Semitism. They've never had to really say what they mean. They just kind of hand wave at the protests. There was no process for letting the schools remedy any of this. Title VI, which is the law that's at issue here that prevents discrimination and harassment at universities, calls for those things, findings, and 30 days, and letting the universities try to fix it and having remedies that are directly related to the harm, right? This purported harm of anti-Semitism. And what troubles me the most about all of this maybe is that none of that has existed in any way. And there also, as yet, isn't a clear statement from the courts about why this is illegal, why you can't go about with this wildly disproportional punishment of these schools, right? I mean, it's the same concept we were just talking about in our first segment. Disproportionality. Okay, you can make an argument that there was anti-Semitism at Columbia. There was a task force there that documented a lot of complaints from Jewish students. Both Jewish and Muslim students have talked about in large numbers feeling that it's like they're uncomfortable with their identities on campus. There are harms to address, but the idea that you address it by, pausing all of the federal research funding at the school, and then in Harvard's case, subjecting it to all these investigations, it's just wildly bigger and unrelated to this harm. And there has been very little reckoning with that so far, which is why whatever Harvard does, I really hope they do it after the judge rules in the Harvard lawsuit, because the judge, Allison Burroughs, she held a hearing. She asked a bunch of questions. We should hear from her and get some law on this issue before we have another agreement from one of these schools.
Is there a way, Emily, is it smarter for institutions to fight on the grounds of whatever these agreements are, once they get put in place, than to have the fight now. So could the school say, hey, you're trying to do this with your independent monitor. That's totally against what the Supreme Court has ruled. And does that put them in a better place? And is this a contract, by the way, or is this just an agreement? In other words, could the administration then say, well, wait, you've broken a contract, which is no longer about Civil Rights Act. It's then about the terms of the contract.
Well, they can definitely have fights over the contracts. And there's language in the settlement agreements that allows the government to open a new investigation based on further allegations. And one of the critiques from people who don't like these settlements is like, you really trust the Trump administration to stop? Like, are you kidding?
Right.
I mean, we're going to find out the answers to all of those things. And in the Columbia case, this independent monitor has just so much power. So that's going to be interesting to watch. I mean, yeah, I don't know. A lot of these terms are really subject to debate. So when I've been talking to law professors at these schools and asking them like, well, what do you think this means? They're like, well, yeah, we're going to find out. And it's not subject to a judge. So there's going to be a lot of private parties and the United States trying to, make arguments about whether they're complying or not.
This word means what I say it means today.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the Trump administration's policy. And I expect, since it holds all the cards here, I was really struck by the parallels between the tariff deals that have been struck and these deals with the universities. And it was sort of like this metaphor as I was sleeping last night of a piggy bank came to me. And I feel like that if you think about our relationships with Korea or the United States' relationship with Harvard, if you think of it as a form of a piggy bank, you think of it as you put money into this. Like the money you're putting in at Harvard is in the form of we're investing in education. We're investing in the idea that we're creating intelligence, science, drug advancement for the future. And we're doing that when the U.S. is putting some money in, Harvard's putting some money in, other parties, everyone's putting money in. And the ultimate outcome is like in the future, we're going to be able to use that for something. And similarly, in a trade relationship, you say like that we're putting investments in today, but there's some element of storing wealth in the relationship itself. And what Trump has done is come along and said, I'm fucking breaking this bank and I'm taking some of this wealth because the relationship, the down the road relationship, the idea that Harvard produces something of greater value from the savings in that piggy bank is not worth it to me. I am uninterested in that. I'm interested in getting a win, and that win is money, it's humiliation, it's damaging its ability to function. And similarly, in a tariff, it's like, I'm getting money out of the Koreans. They're going to invest, they're going to buy a bunch of stuff from us. But it damages the Korean economy and it damages the interrelationship of the Korean and US economies. And I just feel like it's just but he gets a win. He gets his deal. He gets his deal out of it. And that's all he really cares about.
The only way I would tweak that a little bit is that he probably doesn't hate South Korea as much as he hates the Ivy Leagues. I mean, there's the cultural and the argument would be, maybe they get you get a drug or two out of this, stuff, but they set the elite terms of the culture and of the public square in a way that disadvantages the rest of the country. And so whatever upside there is, there's a lot of downside too. And I don't think there's that animus for most of for the EU or the UK, despite what he may say rhetorically about how, about those countries or those trade deals.
But there is the same thing, David, you're right, like this immediate claim, oh, they capitulated, I won, here's this great deal. And then, the devil's in the details, but they'll get worked out later. And I imagine the schools, that's a reason that they could hope that like, oh, well, maybe the worst won't come to pass and it'll be fine. Like we'll interpret these ambiguous terms in ways that are actually like to our advantage and no one's going to really pay attention. The law firms in their promise to do all this pro bono work that Trump wants have been counting on that as well. The problem, of course, is that, in 6 months or a year or 2 years, Trump could be bored and want to toy with them again and then come back. And the politics could, in his view, be in his favor to do that.
And also, we must total up. He has not had success with the Federal Reserve, an institution that he has tried to bend, but think of all the institutions that he has been wildly successful in getting to do what he wants. Penn, Columbia, Harvard, USAID, Planned Parenthood, NPR, PBS, Paramount,
Disney.
all those law firms, Coca-Cola, the Supreme Court. He has been, I don't know. I mean,
overwhelmingly successful. Overwhelmingly successful.
Overwhelming. I was just about to say, historically, no one in as short a time has been able to rack up those successes. And what I wonder is,
I would put the word successes in quotes. They're successes for him. They're in many ways tragedies for the world.
And the question then becomes, in terms of their longevity, as you pointed out, Emily, it's clearly been a pattern and practice of his that when he gets bored, he re-engages in some of the most, satisfying of these kinds of fights. Satisfying because they recenter him as the focus of everyone's attention, and also they take on these institutions he doesn't like. But back to the marketplace point that I make inevitably all the time, if I am now an ambitious politician rising up in the MAGA movement, I now have a number of set plays that I can go perform in off Broadway. So in other words, it's not just about like Planned Parenthood. I now have a real set of things I can do with respect to the Ivy Leagues and the law firms. So there's a market now for ambitious politicians to keep refreshing these battles.
You know what's interesting, Emily, about the law firms? I was just thinking about why the law firms are different and why the law firms, these settlements have not been great because there have been an exodus of lawyers, because also they're independent law firms that are just like, screw it, we're going to keep going. We're going to do whatever we want to do. It's because law firms only are human capital. The universities have all this physical infrastructure. They have all this land. They have all this. They are built in a place and they can't move. They have to. Law firm just moves it off. Like the people just go somewhere else. Like a university has to continue to operate in the same place with all these buildings, with all this infrastructure, and that makes them a much easier target. They have to give in some ways, whereas a law firm
also they're dependent on all this research funding, right? I mean, the university, the way their finances work is like the part we think of as liberal arts education is like a little, pimple on the nose of this whole medical and scientific apparatus that is dependent on federal research funds. It's not, they have other kinds of money that come in, but it's a percentage. And, if you want to wipe out the university's role or diminish it in medical and scientific research, you have to reckon with the fact that then we're going to be dependent on private industry, which doesn't like to do the basic research and development that we've depended on for a lot of our big achievements and moments of progress. So there's just such a like self-inflicted wound that the United States is causing on itself and its higher education system. On the other hand, because the universities, especially the elite ones, have these big endowments and are by definition elitist because they're so selective, they are ripe political targets.
John, just going back to your point about the playbook now that for if you want to do an off-Broadway, I feel like what's happened at UVA is a version of that, and what's happening at George Mason, where the president, George Mason, is just getting pilloried. Basically, he seems to be getting pilloried because he's black. Like that's all I can figure out, and because the faculty senate put a resolution supporting him. But that does seem that's a good example of what you're pointing to.
And at UVA, the idea is that the governor of Virginia is bounced the president of UVA out because he has future ambitions, and this was a way for him to demonstrate that he's, in sync with the current zeitgeist of the MAGA movement.
This episode of the Gabfest is sponsored by Found. Do you ever feel like managing your business finances is a full-time job on top of your actual full-time job? You can change that today with Found. Found is a business banking platform that allows you to effortlessly track expenses, manage invoices, and prepare for taxes. You can even set aside money for different business goals and control spending with different virtual cards. One Found user said, "Found is going to save me so much headache. It makes everything so much easier. Expenses, income, profits, taxes, invoices even." And Found has 30,000 five-star reviews just like this. Join the other small businesses who are loving Found. Don't put this one off. Join thousands of small business owners who have streamlined their finances with Found. Open a Found account for free at found.com/Gabfest. That's FOUND.com/Gabfest. Found is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services are provided by Piermont Bank, member FDIC.
At Blinds.com, it's not just about window treatments. It's about you, your style, your space, your way. Whether you DIY or want the pros to handle it all, you'll have the confidence of knowing it's done right. From free expert design help to our 100% satisfaction guarantee, everything we do is made to fit your life and your windows. Because at Blinds.com, the only thing we treat better than windows is you. Visit Blinds.com now for up to 50% off with minimum purchase plus a professional measure at no cost. Rules and restrictions apply.
Who is Emile Beauvais, the Trump nominee who won a 50-49 vote that will put him on the Third Circuit, Emily?
Yeah, that's Judge Emile Beauvais to you.
Exactly.
I think he's not. I thought he's actually not yet a judge. I think he's been confirmed, but he is not yet a judge.
Yes, this was a rhetorical point.
Good, fair point. I was being pedantic. You were being rhetorical. I was being pedantic. Emily will now be precise.
Usually, it's my job to be pedantic.
Emile Beauvais has been one of President Trump's defense lawyers. Then he was very high up in the Justice Department in the last several months, in a position, by the way, for which he did not require Senate confirmation. And he was the person behind dropping the case against Mayor Eric Adams in New York, the way that he tried to force the hand of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan caused the resignations of, a number of lawyers, including Danielle Sassoon, who was the acting U.S. attorney there. That was one scandal because it just seemed like there was a lot of evidence from the point of view of the protesting lawyers that there was like this kind of transactional deal being made with Adams that was wildly inappropriate and not how the Justice Department operates. So anyway, Beauvais moved from that scandal to another one about whether he was basically in high-level meetings about immigration cases, all the flurry of deportation orders from the Trump administration this spring, whether he was saying that if the courts ruled against the Trump administration, well, it would be time to say fuck you to the courts. One of the lawyers who resigned filed a whistleblower complaint alleging that. This is Erez Ruveni. Then there were a couple of other whistleblowers who came forward in the last several days, also backing up Ruveni and bringing forth other allegations that Beauvais was just like abusing his position in the Justice Department. But the Senate Republicans rushed to confirm him anyway, despite all of this. And I guess, I'm not surprised that the confirmation went through. It was a priority for Trump. Beauvais is getting a lifetime appointment on a powerful appeals court. He also could very well be in line for a Supreme Court appointment. I mean, this is where you put people to get them the credentials that people have come to expect for the Supreme Court. So there's all of that. I have to say that seeing Senator Charles Grassley say, well, even if most of these allegations are true about Beauvais, there's no real scandal here. Like, that was, I will say, shocking to me. I just don't understand how we've gotten to a place where a senator could look at these allegations and say, well, yeah, maybe he did say that it's time to say fuck you to the courts and not obey their orders. And yeah, maybe he did enter into some corrupt deal with Eric Adams and shove the U.S. Attorney's Office into complying. But all of that's really okay because what? The Justice Department should have no independence, and the kind of prosecutorial ethics that have been so fundamental to how it's operated for decades just really don't matter anymore.
And again, I think there are two questions. There's one, whether he did all the things that were alleged that he did. But as you just really quite rightly focus on, Grassley is saying, if all that's true, it still doesn't matter. This is a person who's spent his life, or lots of his life, as a senator on the Judiciary Committee. I would add another thing in that, which is to say the work basically purging from the Justice Department all the people involved in the January 6th investigations, which is an act of, which is just being a grievance enforcer, which might be, good hardball politics. But if you're talking about lifetime appointments and whether the person you're evaluating, cares about the standards of law, which is placed, it's supposed to matter. It seems like that's a really hard thing for someone to say, what Grassley said.
Yeah, I don't get it.
I mean, you guys are getting at this, but what Trump's had a lot of judicial nominees. He's put several people on the Supreme Court who were nominated by him.
In his first term. This is only the second one in the second term. Sorry.
What makes Beauvais a different beast than Amy Coney Barrett or Gorsuch?
He has a better successful track record of being the agent of the president's maximalist hardball activities. Coney Barrett didn't. Coney Barrett wasn't carrying out his grievance against the January 6th prosecutors or working the deal with Eric Adams for whatever the purpose there was, whether it was immigration or something else. I mean, he's got real-time activity to evaluate. You don't have to guess.
I mean, Emily, we've talked a lot about Trump's effort to change the judiciary, but it's a ship of Theseus task. It is not something that happens like you don't have. It doesn't happen all at once. It's like piece by piece. Why is one person on I don't know how many people are on that court, probably a dozen people are on the Third Circuit. Why is it a big deal? Like why, there's a lot of appeals court judges in the US.
Yes. Something like 180 of them, if I'm not mistaken. Well, first of all, they're setting him up for a potential Supreme Court nomination. And second of all, there's just the standard for what it takes to be a judge. And again, Trump's success in changing all the norms of that and getting the Republicans to go along so that you have someone like Chuck Grassley, who's been in the Senate all this time, saying like, nothing to see here. I mean, that makes it easier to confirm the next very loyal, MAGA person you have in line. And in fact, when Trump nominated Emile Beauvais for this position on the court, he had a social media post in which he said, quote, that Beauvais would end the weaponization of justice, restore the rule of law, and do anything else that is necessary to make America great again. Emile Beauvais will never let you down. That is very much like making Emile Beauvais into a MAGA judge. That is not how we think of independent judges. And of course, when Beauvais was actually testifying before the Senate, he said, I'm no one's henchman. Of course, you
think our henchmen are like, I'm really glad to be his henchman.
Right,
I'm a henchman.
Yes,
is that a job title?
Right, exactly.
I was second henchman and now I've been promoted to lead henchman. It's been great. Better benefits.
But I mean, the funny thing about that is henchmen, from Donald Trump's view of things, yes, henchmen. I mean, in other words, when he used to say, I love the word nationalist, I mean, henchman means you are devoted to Donald Trump and you are willing to carry out whatever he wishes. That's not being a henchman. That's like a job requirement. It's literally what they're interviewing people to work in the executive branch must clear those hurdles.
And now it's what you also have to clear to be in the judicial branch, at least in this instance, right? And there's a lot for Trump to be gained in crossing that boundary and taking a standard from one branch of government that at least works for the president to this other supposedly co-equal independent branch.
And I think you're identifying the fact that the president mentioned his loyalty to him and to the MAGA cause. Think about, by the way, the president's personal lawyers and what they've been up to this week. You had his personal lawyer, Todd Blanche, the number 2 at the Department of Justice, down interviewing Ghislaine Maxwell. You had Alina Habba, the U.S. District Attorney.
U.S. Attorney. The SOA.
U.S. Attorney.
Soi-disant
Southern District.
U.S. Attorney.
Yeah. So it used to be sort of, if you were in the judicial, and Emily, you can help me with the taxonomy here, but you used to have to say like, I'm a Scalia jurist or whatever. And that was the thing. And then it was, you were associated with the Federalist Society. I think what this moment, to your original question, David, nails is the extent to which what might in a traditional sense have seemed like a detriment for a judicial nominee, which is to say whistleblowers claiming you were acting in a non-judicial way, is in fact now an honor because the standard is now allegiance to the president and MAGA, or that's effectively useful. In other words, which senator wants to vote against somebody the president has held up in this way? That's you're making a career decision, even though 2 Republicans did, Murkowski and Collins. Let's
end on another thing that happened in the Remake the Judiciary movie that's happening. There was a Department of Justice request this week for an investigation of Jeb Boasberg, the judge who attempted to constrain the Trump administration's deportations to the CCOT prison in El Salvador. This claim preposterously that he undermined the presidency by suggesting the president would defy court orders and that makes him, I don't know, unfit to be a judge or something. It's an obvious
censured by the Judicial Council. That's what they're arguing.
It's funny. You know what? It was sent. I noticed that it was sent to Sri Srinivasan, And Shri and Jeb and I used to play in a basketball game together. So I'll be interested. It'll be interesting if Shri is like, we should censure Jeb. He was not very good. He didn't pass enough.
What was the name of your team? The Deep State Canucks or something?
Brett Kavanaugh also played in that game.
Oh my gosh! It's
Julius Janikowski occasionally was in it. There was a lot of Obama people.
I feel like that's like high law, and then David Plotz.
Well, Shri is a great player. Jeb is an excellent player. Jeb played at Yale. Brett Kavanaugh was excellent. They were all good. They were all played. It was a good game. And former Gabfest producer Bill Smee was the person who introduced me to that game. Anyway, it's an obvious attempt to intimidate or sideline Boasberg, which probably won't work on him, but it will work on making other judges a little more hesitant or making people not want to be judges.
Yeah. Also, let's just talk about this. I mean, the Judicial Conference, which is the body that administrates, kind of oversees the federal courts, they had a meeting in March. Behind closed doors, Boasberg, maybe, according to a summary memo, said, there's some judges on my court who are concerned about whether the Trump administration is going to follow court orders. That's it. That's the whole thing. It wasn't public. He didn't say anything about the president personally. He was informing Chief Justice Roberts that he had heard this concern from some of the judges on his court.
And if I may interject, the Department of Justice censure request claims that what he said was public. So
precisely,
this ain't just some mere fact. They got it wrong. Anyway, carry on.
Right. I mean, I think that it would have been fine for him to say this publicly, in fact, but he absolutely did not. These are private remarks. What is, really one remarkable thing about this story is that all of this leaked, because that is not what is supposed to happen to things that happen behind closed doors at the Judicial Conference. So anyway, that's the whole basis for the whole wild complaint, is this leak, which was clearly designed to try to embarrass Boasberg and I guess set him up for this complaint. But that's the substance of what we're talking about.
And we should also note, of course, that it's Boasberg who is in this tussle with the administration, or has been, over whether the administration denied his court order, which was to turn around the plane that was carrying Venezuelans to El Salvador. A key player in that was Emil Bove. And also, right?
Yes.
It was above. Yeah.
That's one of the accusations.
It's just the fact that this is happening in the same week is bonkers.
Right. And what was actually news to me about this leak from the Judicial Conference was the leak included what Chief Justice Roberts supposedly said in response, which was, I think everything's going to be fine. Donald Trump has been very polite to me at the State of the Union. I mean, nothing to see here, which I don't actually know if that has anything to do with whether they are going to follow court orders. Oh, and by the way, a week later, they started not following court orders anyway.
And also the Washington Post did an analysis of 160 lawsuits against the administration in which a judge had issued a substantive ruling. And the analysis found that in a third of them, the Trump administration flouted or, rebuffed or essentially didn't perform according to the standards of judicial behavior, which would seem to, this has come subsequent to Boasberg's concerns about this. So on the one hand, you have a redefining of standards in the elevation of Bove, and then in this effort against Boasberg, a kind of strict reading of standards that don't seem to even apply to the facts of the actual case.
Yeah. And I mean, one other just quick point to make. Why would Boasberg be the one bringing this to Robert's attention if indeed that's what happened? He's the chief judge of the district court in D.C., which is, because it's in Washington, often where these lawsuits against the government begin. And so it's his judges, there are 25 of them, who are on the receiving end of so many of these complaints. So of course they're wondering about whether the government is going to comply, given all the things that Trump and other officials are saying publicly. Because, even before Bove said this thing, which he's accused of saying about telling the courts, fuck you, there were, rumblings about whether Trump was really going to respect district court rulings from the president. He was asked, would you obey a Supreme Court ruling? And he said yes, but he did not make the same clear statement about the district courts.
Let us go to cocktail chatter. When, Emily Bazelon, you're having a Maine growler, big beer you've gotten at some nice Maine brewery with with Mr. Bazelon. What are you going to be chattering about? Also, don't people in Maine drink more than anybody in the country? I feel like Maine has the highest rates of... You think it's Wisconsin?
I thought it was Wisconsin, but that might be just my relatives. No,
I think I'm going to stay out of the which.
I'm going to Google it while you chatter.
I have a very related chatter, actually. Forgive me. So, in the middle of all of these questions about the courts comes Judge Royce Lamberth, who is an 82-year-old Reagan appointee on the same district court for Washington. And he, this week, said that the Trump administration had violated his order in April mandating a restoration of news programming at Voice of America. That's the news organization that's supposed to provide independent reporting to countries that don't have very much press freedom, countries like Iran, for example. And the Trump administration tried to cut off the funding. Lamberth has been dealing with this lawsuit ever since. And there's a statutory mandate with clear requirements about what kind of and how much programming Voice of America is supposed to provide to particular countries. And Lamberth is saying, I ordered you to comply and you're really just not doing it. And so what we're seeing here is, one judge trying very hard to hold the federal government into account to obey the law passed by Congress, right? I mean, I actually talked to Judge Lamberth for a story I did a month or two ago about the district courts in DC and one of his colleagues, Judge Amir Ali. And, Lamberth has made really clear in his written opinions that he is not trying to, impose some idea of his own or of the judiciary. He's looking at the text of the statute from Congress, which is still law, and trying to make sure that it still has some kind of weight to it. So, case to watch, this case about Voice of America and what Judge Lamberth can accomplish by trying to make sure that the Trump administration is actually telling the truth in court and doing what the statute requires.
It is not Maine or Wisconsin.
Yeah.
New Hampshire.
New Hampshire. Yeah.
Delaware second. Wisconsin and Maine not even in the top 5 that I saw. Top 6.
Wisconsin's 7 by what I looked at.
What is your chatter, John?
I got a couple of chatters. One is I didn't know about the SS Eastland disaster in the Chicago River in 1915, which was the deadliest maritime disaster in Great Lakes history, the largest, I think, disaster in Chicago history. And it's the law of unintended consequences. So 844 passengers and crew died. And what's crazy about it, when I was reading about it, is the Eastland was docked. Essentially, in other words, not out in the stormy seas, tossed and turned. And what essentially happened is it got top heavy. And one of the reasons that it was top heavy, one of them, it wasn't the. It's unclear whether this was the pure cause, but it was a cause. Was that in the wake of the Titanic disaster, ships were mandated to have more lifeboats. And so they had piled on more lifeboats, and that made it top heavy. And basically, it rolled over and pinned all the people who'd gotten on board.
Oh, my God.
Inside.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah. It's awful. It's awful. So that was just...
Do you know how many people were on board? So 844 out of how many died?
2,500 people were on board.
Okay. Jesus.
Yeah. And it's just crazy because the pictures of it, you see the Eastland just on its side, only half of its body in water, and the rest, out in the open, and it's parked right, in port next to a building. It looks like nobody should have died. Anyway, so that just was one of those, how do I not know about this? The other thing is there is just an amazing story in The Economist, and which I recommend all of you. It's the headline is "Would You Pass the World's Toughest Exam?" And it's basically about the railway exam you have to take in India, which, I mean, it's just impossible to explain. You reading it, I was like, there is this incredibly difficult test, and an entire city has built up around housing and training people for this test. And the test is not only difficult and of general knowledge, even though you might just be a ticket taker, but you don't always know when the test is going to be given. And so one of the main characters of the piece ends up basically moving to the city that, which I won't try to pronounce, and studies for 6 years, living in a tiny little room, waiting for the test to be called so that he can take it. And there are all of these gurus who teach how to, do well on the test. Anyway, it's one gobsmacking thing after another. Anyway, that's it's a long read in The Economist's mini section 1843.
There are a lot of trains in India, but I don't remember them being that well run by the most brilliant minds of India. They seem like they're just trains. A lot of them they're train accidents in India too.
Well, when you read the Baroque and very weird system that trains them for this incredibly difficult test, you can imagine how that might get repeated or carried on into the train system, where even though individuals might be incredibly knowledgeable, there's like this clotted system that has grown up that it's just nuts.
My chatter, I went this past weekend to see the new Marvel movie, The Fantastic Four, First Steps, I think it's called. And I'm not like a Marvel person. I'm not really a superhero person at all. I don't really like those movies. I loved this movie. It is incredibly lovely and sweet and very humane. It's an extremely humane movie. It is most like the movie it is most like is The Incredibles, I think. But what I really was struck by was the production design. It depicts a world. People call it retrofuturism. It's an alternative mid-century America where kind of mid-century architecture is triumphant. These sweeping wide windows, this wide furniture, wonderful colors. The cars have fins for days. And then it is a culture that's depicted, because a lot of it's about the culture that the Fantastic Four, these people are living in, that is optimistic about technology, that trusts in technology, that trusts in the brilliant scientists and thinkers who are working for the future. And it combines this sci-pop optimism with public trust in a way that just makes you feel like, oh, what it would be to live in a world like that. How nice it would be to live in a world like that. And it really gave me nostalgia for a world that doesn't exist, has never existed. What is it called when you have nostalgia for something that has never been? But it's a beautiful, fun movie.
I have that about myself a lot.
The old John Dickerson who never was.
Yes, exactly. I've got to get back to my old self that never existed.
It never was. Yes, we knew you when, John, and you were same sloppy John Dickerson. The same shortcomings. Anyway, listeners, thanks for sending us your chatters. Please keep them coming to us. Email them to us at gabfest@slate.com, whatever you're chattering about your cocktail parties. And our listener chatter this week comes from my friend Sarah Wayland, my wonderful friend Sarah. I can't wait to hear what Sarah has to say.
This story, written by Tracy Thompson, author of many books including The New Mind of the South, is a lovely exploration of a past that's fading from existence in America and its attendant emotion, solastalgia. It's a long and beautiful read. It reminded me of the lines from Laurie Anderson's song, The Dream Before. She said, "What is history?" And he said, "History is an angel being blown backwards into the future." He said, "History is a pile of debris, and the angel wants to go back and fix things, to repair the things that have been broken. But there is a storm blowing from paradise, and the storm keeps blowing the angel backwards into the future. And this storm is called progress." Enjoy the read.
That's all for our episode this week. We also, of course, have a bonus episode in your feed. It's about Sydney Sweeney.
Oh, God.
John can't wait to tape it. He's really excited.
We're going to talk about the Sydney Sweeney Good Genes ad. Why are we talking about that? I don't know. Why is the Slate Political Gabfest talking about that? I'm not sure. I think it's the fact that both Emily and I were out of town. John's been really busy. It's going to be very random, but it's only for Slate Plus members.
You only
so good luck with that. Good luck subscribing to Slate Plus to get things like that. Our random thoughts on Sydney Sweeney. But you also get bonus episodes to other Slate podcasts, so that might be of value.
Second prize is 2 weeks in Philadelphia.
Subscribe to Slate Plus directly, if you must, from the Political Gabfest show page or on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or visit slate.com/Gabfest Plus to get access wherever you listen. We are not the only Slate podcast this week worth listening to. We may not even be a Slate podcast this week worth listening to, in fact. But Death, Sex, and Money, the wonderful Slate podcast Death, Sex, and Money, has an episode, The Real Life Willy Wonka Who Built Tony Hawk a Secret Desert Train. It's about somebody named N.D. Austin who designs amazing experiences for people. He also grew up in a doomsday cult in Alaska. So listen to Death, Sex, and Money. That's our show for today. The Gabfest is produced by Cheyna Roth. Our researcher today, again, is Nora Moses. Thank you, Nora. Our theme music is by They Might Be Giants. Ben Richmond is Senior Director for Podcast Operations. For Emily Bazelon, John Dickerson, and David Plotz, thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.